Hey, this is John of John's Record Collection. This is box number 12, Gemini Crickets to Groupie Girl. Hey everybody, this is John from John's Record Collection. So this is the box with Gemini Crickets to Groupie Girl. And so let's see what's in the box. What is in the box? So the Gemini Crickets, I forgot what the heck these things were, but I believe this is a barbershop quartet, and I probably bought it because it has a Beatles song on it, and oh, it has Rubber Ducky, so it has the Ernie from Sesame Street version of Rubber Ducky, and it has When I'm 64 from the Beatles, so that's why I bought it. So it has a Beatles song on it. It is a barbershop quartet, not quartet. Barbershop quartet. And Up and Away by the Generation Gap, psychedelic cover. And this is not the Phil Collins or Peter Gabriel Genesis. So Genesis in the Beginning. The reason this is unusual is because I think the Peter Gabriel Genesis also released an album of this name, and so it gets confusing. But this is a band that was a bit more of a Jefferson Airplane-ish male-female vocals psychedelic band, and it's good. And let's see. An excellent soft pop psych record, Gentle Soul on Epic Records. Very nice. And Bobby Gentry, the Delta Suite. So this is so Bobby Gentry, she's obviously better known for Ode to Billy Joe. This was an album she did after the hit, but even though it didn't get necessarily a lot of attention, it's a good album. And Geraldine and Ricky, Trees Talk 2. So this is a Christian ventriloquist record. The Germs, Germicide. So the LA punk band The Germs. I believe Belinda Carlisle plays drums on this under the pseudonym Donna Rhea, like rhymes with gonorrhea. So this is actually some pretty raw punk rock. The Gift of Tongues, Glossolalia. So this is a field recording of somebody engaging in the gift of tongues, going into a trance and engaging in the gift of tongues during some religious ceremony. And then so Gilberto Gil and Rita Lee. So this is a Brazilian Tropicalia record. It came after so it's early 70s. But if you like Brazilian music, you'll want to look at names like Gilberto Gil, Gal Costa, Rita Lee, folks like that. Orson Mutantes, very nice people. The Cheerful Insanity of Giles and Fripp. This has Robert Fripp, who would become, the major force behind King Crimson. This is a more whimsical Monty Python-ish stuff that came before. Giorgio, this is Giorgio Moroder, who kind of a pioneer in electronic music. He later became the producer for Donna Summer and a lot of that disco stuff. This is stuff he did in the late 60s. He had a minor hit with Son of My Father. There's also a song he did on here that was that was sampled by DJ Shadow on his Introducing album. Girl on a Motorcycle. I love 1960s soundtracks with motorcycles. Hello. You may see my dog Smokey creeping into the shot every once in a while. So let's say hello to Smokey if you'd like. Anyway, back where we started, this is The Girl on a Motorcycle. It was an X-rated movie starring Marianne Faithfull, and it is on Tetragrammaton Records. It is, so I have it because I like to have all of these records that, have 1960s movies with motorcycles. It's not really a biker movie. It's more like a cheeseball, softcore movie, or at least I haven't seen it. That's what I'm told. So it's an X-rated movie with Marianne Faithfull. And it has, mostly orchestral backing with motorcycle sound effects and maybe some heavy breathing on it. And let's see, Girl Trouble. This is a band on Sub Pop, kind of a garage revival act, kind of in the same place that Jack White was in before he was in the White Stripes. And Girls in the Garage. This is a great compilation of Asian women doing sort of garage and girl group songs from the 60s. One reason I have it is it has Nancy Sitt doing a cover version of the Beatles' Run for Your Life in Chinese. And the Glass Family Electric Band. And there's another Glass Bottle. So these are two psych bands of the era. The Glass Orchestra. So this is an orchestra, basically where people use glass instruments made out of glass, usually some sort of wine glass or glass container, and then rub the rim of it, and it has that kind of otherworldly, angelic, glassy sound to it. So music, Irma Glenn, Music Ecology and You. This was in the first of the Incredibly Strange Music books, and it's kind of some of those people on a weird pre-hippie spiritual trip. This one has to do a lot with nature and communing with nature. And Gleneel Cruise It. So this is a kind of an electro funk record that was privately pressed. Definitely something to check out if you can find one. I think there used to be a stash of sealed copies of it around somewhere, but that may have dried up. Another biker movie soundtrack, The Glory Stompers. This is on Sidewalk Records. Oh, and it has Davey Allen and the Arrows, who were on all of the cool, groovy, fuzztone blasting biker movie soundtracks. This was fun. Okay, Crispin Glover. This is the actor Crispin Glover, the same guy who played the dad in Back to the Future. And this is a very crazy record he did called The Big Problem. The problem is the solution. The solution is Let It Be. And he does songs and spoken word bits. He does a cover version of a Charles Manson song. He did he did a rap called Auto Manipulator about how much he likes to masturbate. I mean, the guy was just insanely weird. Very, very weird guy. Here's a band called God Unlimited. Ride On. So this is a nice Christian rock record, and this one is kind of a novelty record. I don't think it's worth that much these days, but I like it. Godfrey Daniel, Take a Sad Song. So Godfrey Daniel was a side project of basically every member of the Amboy Dukes instead of Ted Nugent. And what they did is they did an album of contemporary songs like the Beatles' Hey Jude or Joni Mitchell's Woodstock, but they did them in the style of late 50s and early 60s rock. And it is actually, I mean, in a way, it's funny on a conceptual level, but it's actually very, very nice to listen to. Great nostalgia for early rock and roll, and the guys could play since they were in the Amboy Dukes, and it's an actually well executed record musically. And here's one of the here is one of the crazy groups that came out of ESP Disc Records. So this is God's 2, which is probably their best record. It has like 2 of their best songs, Permanent Green Light and Radar Eyes. The Gods were just a really weird group out of New York. In a way that they were weird in their own way, almost kind of like the Velvet Underground was weird, but obviously they don't sound like each other because they're unique. And this is their first album, Contact High with the Gods, and they spell it Godz. And there's another one that I have. So I have their first 3 albums, Third Testament. Third Testament is actually pretty good. Their musicianship is getting better, but they're still just so off the wall that they don't get what I call Eric Clapton's disease, which is when you get more technically proficient, but you get more boring as a musician. These guys don't get more boring, and there's some really strange, like Quack, I'm a Quack. Basically is a record where they pretend, that's a song where they pretend to be ducks. And Ruby Red is a good song. It's very minimalist and drony, a lot like Radar Eyes and Permanent Green Light, which are those other 2 songs of theirs that I think are some of the best. But this album is good too. And The Go-Go's, Beauty and the Beat. Not an uncommon album, but definitely an album to get. I got this at a garage sale maybe for $1. And here's an all Beatles song record. Moog plays the Beatles, and it has these 2 little troll dolls that are naked in the cover. But even though they are fictional dolls, somebody had to put a sticker over it where the naughty bits are. But who cares? It's all about the music, and this is Moog plays the Beatles, and this has some really nice Moog synthesizer covers of Beatles songs. And The Barry Goldberg Blues Band, Blowing My Mind. So this is kind of one of those blues bands like the Blues Project or the Mike Butterfield Blues Band that were around in 1965 and 1966 and were around at the time that things started psychedelicizing, but they were kind of an early wave of blues rock groups from that time period. A Christmas Present from Gold Fever. So this is a it's a record, but it's kind of blues rockabilly. Even though it's a Christmas record, it's associated with a guy named J.D. Brennan, who I think was an old rockabilly guy. And the thing about some of these rockabilly guys from the 50s is some of these guys just never stopped. That like once they played rockabilly, once they played rock and roll, they never stopped rocking until they were in a coffin. So J.D. Brennan was one of those guys, and this is a record he did with his band Gold Fever. And the Golden Briars. This is a band. It's a early folk rock effort. It has a guy named Kurt Boettcher in it, who's very influential on Sunshine Pop as a writer and producer. But this is a band that he was in as a musician, and it's kind of an early influence on folk rock. And they wear these really cool black turtlenecks on the front cover. Lonnie Golden, Motorcycle. I don't know how rare this is these days. It wasn't necessarily that rare to pick up, but basically she's a very soulful singer, although sometimes she could like really, really lengthen out some of the phrases she was singing and make something that was 5 minutes be almost like 10 minutes. And this is a good record in this regard. And what is next in the box? This is another Texas psychedelic band. You have to listen to this, psychedelic bands from Texas. Power Plant. And look at that. Look at that amazing psychedelic Day-Glo cover with the mushrooms and the leaves, probably marijuana leaves of some kind. Just an amazing front cover. And they were on a pretty spiritual trip. Golden Gate. I think this is a little underrated as a soft Sunshine Pop record. I like it. It's on a budget label called Audio Fidelity. The name of the album is Year One. Vertigo by Joe Goldmark. This is interesting because it has a steel guitar cover of And Your Bird Can Sing by the Beatles. Now, I don't know who has a copy of this. This is Walter Goldschmidt. It's a cultural anthropology record. So it was issued by a record label called Lectern Records. So I guess their thing was trying to put out records that you could listen to, like a college lecture. But I guess the concept didn't necessarily sell a lot of records. So this is a record that is designed to teach people anthropology. And what else? The great psychedelic band Gong, Angel's Egg. And I have some more. Camembert Electrique by Gong. It's also sometimes known as planet gong, and they were a very, very unusual sort of jazzy progressive rock group. Time for Good Cheer. This is a Private Press record. One of the reasons I happen to like this record is they're kind of sunshine pop, but what's odd about them, they're like sunshine pop or lounge, but then they do the sunshine pop songs in these really weird minor key arrangements, or they use a very unusual set of chord progressions. So it's almost like they're trying to be the Black Sabbath of sunshine pop, if that makes any sense. I don't think they necessarily knew any better, but they just sort of stumbled into something that was unusual and actually sounds good. So this is a band called Good Cheer, Time for Good Cheer. And let's see. Jim Gordon plays heavy. Jim Gordon was a keyboard player, session keyboard player. He also later ended up in the band Derek and the Dominoes, which was an Eric Clapton side project. Unfortunately, he later went crazy and killed his mother. I think he's still in a hospital for the criminally insane. But this is a relatively unusual or hard to find record that he did as a solo artist. And Gospel Snake. This is a bluegrass album which has one of the bluegrass Beatles covers I'm looking for. It had Lady Madonna on it. And so Carol Gott. So Carol Gott is from Czechoslovakia, or the country that used to be Czechoslovakia. And what is very historically distinctive about him is that he was the first person to record a Beatles cover from behind the Iron Curtain during the days of the Soviet Union. So he was in Czechoslovakia, and he recorded a cover version of the Beatles' From Me to You in Czech. So I believe that is the earliest Beatles cover version from behind the Iron Curtain. And here's another one, the Kazoo Band. The Kazoo Band. It should be the Kazoo Band. So this is an album of mid-1960s hits, circa 1966. What's unusual about it is that they're all played on kazoo. So very unusual choices for covers. There's a rendition of the Hollies' Stop, Stop, Stop that's entirely on kazoo. And Gracious. Gracious is an excellent UK progressive band. If you can find anything they've done, certainly get it. So very much early 70s progressive rock. And so this was a record I got at a record show, Grand Theft. It's Eating Me Alive. So this was a band it was a bunch of folk musicians, but they decided as a gag to do a hard rock record. They did a hard rock record, and they called it Grand Theft because they were making fun of the group Grand Funk Railroad. And basically they went completely nuts, and they sound like Led Zeppelin. They thought it was a joke, but I think their joke actually sounds better than their real stuff. So this is why I got that. Now, if you want hard rock, this is another really good melt your face off hard rock, Granicus. Really, I mean, look at these dudes. Look at these dudes. They're in hard rock. They're hard rock in silhouette form here. And there's a really Cleveland, Ohio. So there's a song called Cleveland, Ohio, and about how I'm getting out of Cleveland, Ohio, and it's all about how Cleveland, Ohio sucks, and how unfunky it is in Cleveland. But that song rocks really hard, and a lot of the songs on this rock really hard. And let's see, Grass Menagerie. This is another bluegrass record. It also has the cover of Lady Madonna on it, and one of the children's cartoon records. So I like those, those cartoon bands like Josie and the Pussycats. So this is another one of those that's not as well known, called the Grasshoppers. It's harder to find than you might think, although I don't think it's a particularly expensive record right now. But yeah, it's called the Grasshoppers. And here's another band. It's a different band called the Grasshoppers. So this is the Grasshoppers sings the Beatles hits, but instead of saying Beatles, they just put a Beatle wig where the word Beatles should be. So it's a bunch of Beatles songs, and it's done in the style of the Chipmunks, except the Chipmunks are supposed to be grasshoppers. I don't know. I don't make records. Okay, this is I Choose to Live, or I Chose to Live. And so this is a spoken word record, but it's backed up by a group called the Gravity Adjusters Expansion Band. And they were an unusual band because they made their own instruments. So they were on a pretty avant-garde trip, and they were so far out on their trip, they basically made their own instruments because they couldn't get sounds out of regular instruments the way they wanted. And so they got this hippie woman, reciting poetry over their music on this record. And great fantasy film music. So this has a bunch of it's a compilation of different movie soundtracks, mostly science fiction, maybe some horror stuff, and a bunch of like electronic stuff. And it's on a record label called Poo. I'm not even sure if it was really Chinese or if it was just something they sold in Chinese stores in New York or something like that. So, but great fantasy film music. So it was kind of a dodgy, questionable compilation that was made in the 70s. And Grace Slick. This is for the Great Society. So the Great Society was the band that Grace Slick was in before she was recruited to join Jefferson Airplane. The Great Society did the original versions of Somebody to Love and White Rabbit, which later became the only top 10 hits of Jefferson Airplane. But the Great Society are great in their own right. They experimented with a lot of the raga drone sound, but they weren't gimmicky or loungy about it. They were a legit, tight, psychedelic rock band with leaning heavily on the raga drone elements, which was very ahead of its time for 1965. And here's another Great Society Volume 2. So Great Society never made a record album while they were still a group. They only got to make a record album after Jefferson Airplane sold a lot of records, and they found that anything, if you put Grace Slick's face on it, people would buy it. So they sold so they basically took all of the tapes that the Great Society recorded out of storage and made albums of it. So that's those two. And Green, another psychedelic group. And I guess there's a bunch of them with the word green in their name. I can't keep them all track. Can't keep track of them all. Futura, Bernie Green and his orchestra. This is a very nice Exotica record with a special die-cut cover. I think I can, I don't know, I'm going to have trouble opening that one. And, Burning Green, Musically Mad. So this is an Alfred E. Newman Mad Magazine record, a novelty record with a whole bunch of different stuff on it. And the Green Hornet, this is a budget label record on Coronet. So the Green Hornet, that was the show that introduced Bruce Lee to the world as Kato, the Green Hornet's chauffeur, assistant, and martial arts expert. And Green Light Sunday, classic psychedelic cover on this. Very nice psychedelic pop. And let's see, here's a Sandy Greenberg, Lighting, a Canadian folk private press. And so this is a very unusual record on Folkways. I like to collect records on the Folkways label. This is called Learning to Talk, a study in sound of infant speech development by Margaret Green. So it's like it's trying to translate the language of how a baby cries. And this is an excellent example of funk and jazz creeping into children's music of the early 1970s. Honey, I Love. It's by a poet named Eloise Greenfield. So it's Eloise Greenfield and Friends. This is a very sought-after record. So there's two versions of it. I think this one is on, let's see, I can't remember what. The other one's on Caedmon, which is a record that did a lot of spoken word records. If you can find the Eloise Green record on Caedmon, I think this one is on a more independent or private label, but they're both good. So if you can find this record, definitely get it. But I think a lot of people have already figured out about this record, so it's much, much harder to find than it used to be. And Joel Gray, Black Sheep Boy. So this is another celebrity record. It's the guy from Cabaret, and it has his version of Cream's White Room in it, believe it or not. And yes, Grodeck Whipperjenny. So I previously opened a box that had James Brown, Show Is Funky Down Here, and I told you that the instrumentals on Show Is Funky Down Here was originally done by a white group, but it was very funky. I mean, you had to be that funky in order for James Brown to pass off your stuff as his stuff. But anyway, so this is kind of a very psychedelic with a funky tinge, white rock by a group called the Grodeck Whipperjenny. And there's a song on here, Sitting Here on a Tongue, which is just very weird. It almost reaches funkadelic levels of weirdness. I mean, nobody can be as weird as funkadelic, but, you know, these guys come close. And another cartoon record. I have to have the cartoon records. Groovie Ghoulies. So this is some very nice bubblegum pop that was done on an early 70s cartoon called the Groupie Girl. You know, they're monsters, but they're groovy. And the last in the box, Groupie Girl. So this is a UK, it's a UK British soundtrack that is mostly, mostly about, groupies to rock stars. And I've never seen the movie. In fact, there's a lot of these soundtracks I have that I've never seen the movie, because often the rule is bad movie, good soundtrack. This has a lot of obscure bands like Opal Butterfly, English Rose, Virgin Stigma, and I'm not even sure, but I think some of these bands only existed for the sake of this soundtrack. If they weren't just created for the sake of the soundtrack, they probably folded shortly thereafter. So that's why some of these soundtracks are collectible. Sometimes they have a group on there that doesn't exist except for appearing on that particular soundtrack. And so that's the box. So I hope you enjoyed looking at the records in box number 12.